What is up, everybody? I think this mic still works. It's Justin Latta from Locked On Guardians, and also we are back for another episode of Guardians of the Future. I had to look at the actual schedule to see what the last time was that we did this, and it has been a while. I apologize. We'll start out with some housekeeping notes. Obviously, if you're new here, this is Guardians of the Future. This has been a long-running podcast that goes back to its days as Smoke Signals way back in the IBI days, and we've changed it since then. Still keeping it from the Guardians Baseball Insider days, and now it's over at Next Year in Cleveland and wherever you find podcasts and YouTube. If you're not a reoccurring listener to the podcast, I do apologize. We haven't had one since spring training, and I'll give you a little peek behind the curtain of why that is, and we'll talk about what we're going to cover in this return episode. So I know it's been a couple of months since we got together and talked prospects here, and that's why I'm doing it by myself. But let's just start out with the main thing. Back kind of around spring training. I mean, I'll say this first. Doing a podcast every day with Locked On Guardians is a lot of work. So it's a lot of work to prepare to do a podcast every day, and finding time in my life to fit other things in, like writing and all the other stuff I'm doing, video and scouting and just watching games and having an outside life, considering none of this is my full-time job, has made it hard to keep the schedule up. Number two, I'll just say, I went through some challenging stuff back in the spring that I was trying to get through. Once baseball season started, it started to get better, but I've been going to therapy and kind of working through my mental health a little bit. So that's probably why we had a bit of a break early on. And once the summer rolled around, things just got really busy between working on those sorts of things and not having time for this. Every time I wanted to sit down and do this, just other stuff would come up, or I'd just be exhausted, or because we usually do this on a Sunday or a Monday when I would record this when there's no minor league games. So it just became very difficult to fit it in schedule-wise. But, found a good time here, especially with a lot of news going on today in the Cleveland Guardians farm system. So we will not wait around anymore. That's kind of the background of all this stuff. And I do apologize, the production quality probably not as good as I would like for this podcast. I'm kind of going through a transition of providers here or tools. So I was using StreamYard before, and we use StreamYard over at Locked On Guardians. And for a personal subscription, it became a little bit too expensive to sustain on my own and pay for my own subscription and not use the Locked On Guardians one, because that's not what it's for. So I'm trying out some free tools right now, and I may purchase a cheaper option, but in the meantime, this will have to work because we wanted to get an episode out. I actually was at a captain's game not long ago, and I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the person I ran into, and I was going to interview Tyler Naquin, and they asked if I was going to do another Guardians of the Future podcast this year, so I figured if at least one person is asking to actually listen to this podcast, I should come back and do an episode and try to have a plan for doing a little bit more, but timing and production costs are, kind of in the way of this thing. But a lot of news on Sunday, August 10th to get into in the Guardians farm system made it worth it to come back. So this is the Guardians of the Future podcast. Please, if you are listening to this, make sure you're subscribing on your audio platforms. Make sure you're subscribing to my personal YouTube page, Justin Latta, so you make sure you always get episodes when they come out, as well as being informed of other things. And that really helps me find more time to do this kind of thing as well. You can also check out Next Year in Cleveland .substack.com for writing, more podcast stuff, more minor league stuff on a larger stage as well. All right, let's get into the big news at this point, honestly. It's the promotions. This is why we're back today. It's the promotions is why we're doing this. The Guardians had a ton of promotions, a lot of exciting promotions in the minor league system on Sunday. And let's start with the big one, obviously. Travis Bazzana is going up to Columbus. No surprise, honestly. I think the only surprise here is that, he didn't have a real great week, but this was the right time to do it because, Juan Brito is probably not coming back this year. If he is, it's going to be a very late comeback. He is, still sidelined with the hamstring issue. So it makes sense. There's no reason. There's nobody playing at Columbus that's really impeding him. And I think this further advances the theory that Travis Bazzana really had a real shot at being up in September for Cleveland had he not had that injury. I know some people are holding on to hope that maybe he comes up to Cleveland in September. I have a very hard time believing that will happen. If he has a really good couple of week stretch in Columbus, if he goes up there and he figures it out and doesn't have any roadblocks, I'm not going to say there's a 0% chance. It just depends on his performance and how comfortable he gets and how he's feeling. The good news is, he looks like he's feeling pretty good from that recovery from that injury. Oblique injuries are probably one of the worst tears or any of that kind of thing. Like, knees and elbows, shoulders for pitchers. Oblique is pretty bad because everything about baseball is rotational, whether you're pitching or hitting, especially hitting, everything's rotational. So your oblique counts for a lot as a player, especially an infielder. So that was not a great injury. So I'm not going to say it's a 0% chance he's coming up in September for Cleveland, but so I wouldn't totally count it out. But if he has a good, nice stretch here in August, when he starts in Columbus on Tuesday in Toledo, they'll be in Toledo. If it's a good 2-week stretch here or 3-week stretch here in the rest of August and the early part of September, if he does really well, maybe that could happen. And also, depends on where the Guardians are at in the playoff race. They may, I don't know. The thing with Bazzana is, we'll talk more about this in Locked On Guardians. The thing is, if the Guardians want him to be in the major leagues next year as part of the team, especially on opening day, because they want that prospect promotion incentive pick from winning Rookie of the Year in 2026, and they would get the pick for the 2027 draft, he would still preserve his eligibility for that award in 2026 if he comes up in September, because he wouldn't have enough service time days. He'd still be a rookie. So he can still come up in September and still be eligible for that. And that would be a big help for them, only for that reason, but also getting him his feet wet in Cleveland before next year. If he's going to start the year on the opening day roster, it might make some sense. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how things progress there a little bit. Arias and Rocchio have had their moments recently, ups and downs from that sort of thing. The nice thing about Bazzana since he's come back on July 18th from playing in the Arizona Complex League where he rehabbed, he's got a 147 WRC+. He's hitting 281, 387, 438. I'd like to see a little bit more power, but the strikeout rate is down in the teens. The walk rate's up in the teens. He's carrying a little bit of a high average on balls in play, but he is fast and he hits the ball at a decent launch angle, so he might carry a higher batting average on balls in play anyway. But it's been a good stretch for him. The only thing I want to see from Bazzana really at this point is being a little bit more aggressive overall at the plate. I want to see him not taking so many pitches because he has such a low swing rate. He has such a low swing strike rate that you often see a lot of strikeouts from him just taking pitches. And I know there's been some other people who worry about like the bat path, like Keith Law has written about his, the steep angle of his bat, making it hard to hit the way he did in college. The contact rates are perfectly fine. He's walking. He's hitting the ball in the air. He's definitely going to get challenged at AAA with pitching there, with that kind of thing. But it's going to be a good hitting environment for him. Let's be honest about that. I'm not really worried about him, and I'm not saying that in dismissive of Keith Law. Like, don't get me wrong, I've been reading Keith Law for a long time. Seems like a good dude, and obviously knows what he's doing. But that being said, not like he's always right. I've probably seen Travis Bazzana play in person more times than he has. He might have talked to more people than I have about him, but I've seen him play in person way more times. And, Keith also had Brian Rocchio as a top 20 prospect in baseball. He also had Jose Tena as a top 100 prospect and one of the Guardians' best prospects. And neither of those guys have lived anywhere near that potential. So it's not like he's a right 100% of the time. Doesn't mean he doesn't know what he's talking about. Doesn't mean he's not, I'm not going after him or anything. I'm just saying we have a difference in opinion, and that's okay. I think a lot of people differ on that and how good he is going to be. He is always, a little bit different, contrarian sometimes, and that doesn't mean he isn't behind what he's saying, but that's perfectly fine. But I'm excited to see Travis at AAA. That lineup in AAA makes it, a lot more fun. We're going to get data in terms of exit velo and what he does against certain pitches, chase rate, whiff rate, all those things. It's going to be a lot of fun to see that. Going up to AAA with him, of course, is Cooper Ingle, which is, a long time coming as well. Cooper Ingle had a bad April. And when I say bad April, his WRC plus in the month of April this year was still over 100. And we called that bad. It was a 224 batting line, which, not great. 224, 315, 368. Was still walking, had some strikeouts. Hit a 104 WRC plus. If you just look at Cooper Ingle's numbers from May 1st until August 8th, so the numbers we have until Friday, he has been hitting since May 1st 290, 411, 467 with a 162 WRC plus. He's walked more than he struck out, both in the mid-teens. He's got 7 homers, 24 doubles. This is a long time coming for Cooper Ingle. The one thing I will say about Cooper Ingle is platoon splits might be an issue for him. He did not do the best against lefties. We got to make sure he hits, want to see if he hits the ball hard enough to compete at a higher level in terms of AAA and the majors to make an impact. But he hits the ball enough now, puts it in play, has a good eye at the plate, doesn't chase. We'll see if that holds up at the higher levels, and that's what we need to see it the most. And then, as far as the defensive side of things, he calls a good game, works well with the pitchers. He, cares back there. He puts a lot of effort in. The throwing arm, not as great as you'd like it to be, but the rest of his stuff really stands out there. He's athletic. He moves well. He's got a smaller size. So I think this is a good move for Ingle, and it really shows that he could be an option next year. Bo Naylor's kind of not really turned things around, but he's been a little bit better lately for Cleveland, better than he was. So Ingle could be an option in 2026. Now, he doesn't need to be added to the 40-man roster until the end of next season. So I'll be curious to see what Cleveland does with that. We'll see what their catching tandem is going into next spring training when it's probably Bo Naylor and Austin Hedges and David Fry. We'll see how they hold off Cooper Ingle and how he does at AAA. But I'm super excited for that one. Tommy Mace, Ross Carver also going to AAA as well. Those guys have been in AA forever, especially Tommy Mace. He's older. Carver, I was high on at one time, and I kind of overinflated Ross Carver a little bit. I really liked the stuff, and I thought he had enough swing and miss, and I thought there was a breakout coming there, and it just never did. Let's talk about the other guys going up from who's going to replace those guys in Akron. So obviously the most exciting one, Ralphy Velazquez goes from Lake County to Akron. This is also long overdue for Ralphy Velazquez. Travis Bazzana is really exciting, but I think the prospect I've enjoyed watching the most this year in terms of his progression is Ralphy Velazquez. He had a rough start to the year. Was carrying a really low average on balls in play, was getting a little bit unlucky, was hitting the ball hard, had some strikeout issues early on, but it was his first extended taste of AA or high A. When he got to high A last year, you could kind of tell that he was good early, and then he struggled because he wore down. It was his first full pro season, and I think you could kind of tell he was getting tired and beat up by the long season, and he was dealing with the thumb thing last year that the Guardians claim kept him out of catching, and he is not catching this year either, so I think that's pretty much done at this point. But he really transformed himself since the month of July. You just look at July 1st until today, he's hitting 316, 395, 535. His strikeout rate is only 14%. His walk rate is 11%, 157 WRC plus. He's got 5 homers, 22 hits, or 36 hits overall, 8 doubles. Just 18 strikeouts in 29 games since then and 15 walks. He has really come a long way over the last month. So this is really long overdue. I'm really excited about the development here. The fact that he has gotten his strikeout rate down to that point and his walk rate looks really good and he's hitting for power, everything here just is trending upwards for him. Positionally, I think it's still first base. Maybe he moonlights in the outfield a little bit. I don't think it'll be terrible. But we'll see what happens. I think Akron is going to be a great step for him. It's a pitcher's ballpark. It's luckily for him, he'll be going to Reading to start his AA career. And Reading is one of the most hitter-friendly ballparks in the Eastern League. Probably the most hitter-friendly ballpark east of the Mississippi, honestly. So it's a good start for him. He might have some great numbers that first week in AA playing at Reading. So good for Ralphy Velazquez. I really enjoyed watching him. I'll be bummed that he won't be at the ballpark anymore, but this was long overdue. The other guy going up to Akron with him is Jacob Cozart. Cozart has had his stretches this year where he's really looked good offensively. He looked like he was starting to turn the corner. He does have his WRC plus up over 100 finally. The strikeout rate's not terrible. It's 21%. The walk rate is 13%. I saw stretches from him where he was, a heck of a lot better in terms of hitting for power and doing a lot more things. But he, the month of June was really good for him. He had a 145 WRC plus in June. As many walks as strikeouts. I still think for Jacob Cozart, you're looking at a guy who is going to be a power over-hit catcher, which, is fine. Kind of what Bo Naylor is, to be honest with you. I think Jacob Cozart and Bo Naylor are very similar in that they're guys who are going to walk, they're going to strike out, they've got power. and they're really back there for their defense. And Kozar, to me, has been a fantastic defensive catcher. I like the arm. He's a little bit bigger. The framing's good. I'd like to see him better with blocking, but that's no different than Bo Naylor. Cleveland still really values framing and game calling and working with the pitching staff. Kozart's got all those tools. Remember, Kozart was the son of the coach at High Point University, who when he caught bullpens for Cody Allen when he was at High Point. So this is a coach's kid who's caught pro guys before. The Guardians probably got some really good intel on him. He seems like a great kid, but this is probably a very similar profile to Bo Naylor. So we'll see as he goes and moves up. I'm very interested in that. Jack Jasiak and Christian Knapsack are also going to Double-A. Jasiak's been, pretty interesting. He looks like he's probably, obviously, a reliever at this point. But, they had to get some arms up there to replace Mason Carver. And Jasiak's been solid. His ERA is, just a little above 3. The FIP is below 3. Doesn't walk a lot of guys. I don't think there's a lot of swing and miss stuff there, but not bad for a 12th round pick. And Knapsack, a very good defender at second base. I don't think he's a shortstop. Had a really good run offensively, like May to June, and hasn't really sustained that. I'm not really surprised. This is not a guy who is really known for his offense. But Knapsack is a good defender who can play around a little bit. Probably fits best at second base, but excited for that promotion for him to replace Travis Bazzana. And then the guys that are coming to Lake County from Lynchburg. Not a ton of huge names, but I will say Rafe Schlesinger, if I can get that name right. By far the most exciting one, if you ask me. I like the arm angle by Rafe Schlesinger. I think it's a really deceptive arm angle for a lefty, very hard to hit, especially with the fastball that's like low to mid-90s. He's got a really tough slider. I've seen a little bit of a changeup from him. Really excited about the progress he's made this year, especially over the last month. I would say probably July to August, we've really seen some more consistency from him. He's got an ERA under 3. He struck out 29, only walked 6 in the last 24 innings. So this is a kid who's missing bats. He's throwing strikes. He's not giving up a lot of hits. So I'm super excited to see what he does at High A. I think long term Rafe is probably a reliever, just with the arm angle and the stuff. I think the velocity would play better in the bullpen, but it's a really good arm angle in terms of deception and just funk and very tough on lefties. And I think he could run the fastball on righties as a left-handed reliever as well. So I'm really excited to see that. Going up with him is Connor Whitaker, who's been kind of a swingman for Lynchburg. He's a solid arm. Luis Flores, who they signed out of the independent leagues. He's going to be a reliever. Bennett Thompson replaces Jacob Kozart in Lake County. Had a really good start to the year offensively, but this is another defensive presence backup catcher profile. Like, makes a lot of contact, not a lot of impact contact, is a really good game caller, good teammate, does a lot of good things offensively or defensively. So that's kind of more that speed right there. I'd expect to see more of a timeshare in Lake County between him and Johnny Tincher, whereas Kozart was the main guy. Those will probably be more of a 50-50 split. And because Tincher is also, a guy who's an defensively minded personality guy. But Jeffrey Mercedes comes up. He's a corner infielder from Lynchburg, who's having some solid season too, who will replace Knapsack. And then Garrett Howe, who was their 11th round pick a year ago. I was really excited about Garrett Howe coming into the system because generally the 11th round is kind of where you might target some guys because you can go over that $150,000 threshold in terms of signing. And last year you had a day between rounds 10 and 11 where you could kind of refigure things and go after some targets. So Garrett Howe seemed like a very intentional target for them a year ago. Has not played up to the level I had hoped at low A this year. We'll see what happens as he goes up. The other guy I hope we get to see at some point in Lake County is Braylon Dowdy. Braylon Dowdy has been a ton of fun to watch pitch. He's having a great year. He's only 19. He won't turn 20 until the offseason. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see him go up as well. All right, that's it for promotions. I also want to get into a quick trade deadline review so we can talk Khal Stephen. I'll talk about the draft, and then I'll get into Arizona Fall League Part 2 candidates for the Guardians as well. Next time I do an episode, I'll talk about my top prospects. I've re-ranked, obviously, since the trade deadline, since the draft. I have new prospect rankings. I will get to those probably in a future episode as I finish those and explain kind of my re-ranks a little bit But I'm not going to do that today in the interest of time. So we'll get to a lot more of that here in just a moment. All right, let's talk trade deadline review really quick. So the Guardians only made one trade for Shane. Obviously, traded Shane Bieber to the Toronto Blue Jays, and they got back Khal Stephen from the Toronto Blue Jays in that trade. And this is a guy that I was super excited about a year ago in the draft. I really wanted Cleveland to take him in the draft, and it sounds like they wanted to take him too, and he got taken just before them. So he was a third-round pick of the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Guardians were very interested in him. So I think they got sniped twice, honestly, last year. So they talked about their interest. I'm sorry, Khal Stephen was the second-round pick of the Blue Jays last year. So the Guardians were interested in him and both Josh Hartle, and I believe they went just picks before Cleveland had a pick. So they weren't able to get Stephen where they got in the second round. They weren't able to get Josh Hartle later, and that's why they took Jacob Cozart and Joey Oki. But I was really excited about Khal Stephen last year. I think this is a really fun arm. It's a fastball that averages 94 almost. He can run it up a little bit higher. It's a really good slider. I really like the changeup he had in college, and it sounds like the changeup has kind of morphed into more of a splitter this year. So he doesn't really have that changeup anymore, but I thought it was his best pitch in college, to be honest. But it is more of a splitter now because he does throw at 84. Which is still 10 miles an hour slower than his fastball, but it's definitely more of a splitter now. He's got a cutter that's come along pretty well. The curveball kind of looks like a show-me pitch. And the sinker, he's also got a sinker he doesn't throw very often either. It's been a pretty good pitch for him this year as well. But I'm really excited to see what he can do. The Guardians feel like the shoulder issue, it was a shoulder impingement that he had in Toronto, is very minor. And from what I've heard from Blue Jays prospect writers is that the Blue Jays were going to come close to shutting him down anyway. He was already at about 48 innings this year, 52 innings, and they don't like to increase. Increase innings that much from the year before. They try to cap it. He didn't throw that many innings in Mississippi State, but this is a guy who was a really good competitor in college. Has a lot of good stuff. It's a good command profile. This is a profile they've worked with before. What I said a year ago, just a very brief, I said Khal Stephen was a personal favorite. Love the four-pitch mix. He'll get whiffs, good size. I called him a high-floor starter last year. So this is a guy that I really wanted Cleveland to get last year in the draft. This is a great target. They have now traded for maybe four members. Let me see where Michael Kennedy went, because if Michael Kennedy is in that class, and that's four members of the 2024 class. Okay, no, Michael Kennedy was a 2022 pick. He came over with Josh Hartle. So 3 members of the 2024 class Cleveland has now targeted outside of the guys that they drafted. So they got their draft class last year. They also traded for Josh Hartle. They traded for Nick Mitchell, who came over in the Andres Gimenez trade, who they kept. And then they also now have Khal Stephen. So they really put their work in when it comes to the 2024 draft. So I can see why Stephen was a guy they targeted. I'm really glad they did that. I think this is going to be a good pick for them, and I'm not concerned about the injury at this time. We'll see what happens. I think Chris Anthony said that they're expecting Khal to pitch at AA Akron at some point this month, and he's in Arizona, just kind of going through that shoulder impingement that seemed very minor, and that's coming too from people who are on the Blue Jays side of things before he got traded. So from everything I've heard, not just the Guardians saying like he's healthy, I've heard from outside sources too that Khal Stephen is going to be perfectly just fine. So we'll see what happens there, but I'm excited for that. Let's get into the 2025 draft class a little bit. I wanted to do a podcast. Normally I do a podcast around the draft. Didn't do it this year. We obviously did a lot of content over at Lockdown Guardians for the draft. You can go over there and listen to all my thoughts there, but I'll give a little bit of an update here of what I liked, what I didn't like. Let's start with Jace Lavalette. This is a profile that's very risky for the Guardians, and obviously there's big tools here, and if it all works out, then Lavalette's going to be a great hitter in the majors. Like, if it all works out for them, they are typically very okay, more than okay. They are whatever the opposite of risk averse is. They are okay with risks in the first round. If you want to go back several years, I mean, Daniel Espino was a risk in the first round because a lot of teams didn't have him on their board because of the size. They were worried about an injury for him at some point, and, here we are. I could mention something about Daniel Espino before the end of this podcast that I've heard, because I know a lot of people have asked me about things I've tipped on Locked On Guardians. Chase the Water, obviously an injury risk, right? He was a first-round risk. Gavin Williams was not on a lot of people's draft boards, at least not that high in 2021, because he had a lot of people, or I'm sorry, 2022. 2021 was, I have to go back and look. Anyway, they didn't have him on the draft board a lot because there were some injury issues too in college. So, I think it was 2021. Anyway, that's something that a lot of teams worried about. So he was off the board for them a lot too. Bo Naylor, high school catcher, that's a lot of risk. They are perfectly fine taking risks in the first round. Travis Bazzana was probably the least risky guy they've taken since, I don't know, Tyler Naquin. Like, Tyler Naquin was a low-risk guy, and you saw the outcome for him, and he was fine for a little bit, and then he wasn't, and now he's going to try to pitch, so good for him. But that's generally the profile Cleveland doesn't get into. They are very fine taking a risk in the first round. Carson Tucker was, I guess, a little bit safe, but, 2020, I don't really know what to make of that. I think I give almost everybody 2020 to a little bit of a mulligan because it was a very difficult year, and it's just very hard to go off that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to really push too hard on the Carson Tucker pick, but they are not averse to risk at all in the first round. The thing I have the risk with Lavalette is it's a lot of, it doesn't chase. This is kind of the route they're going, right? They want guys who can work walks that won't chase, but they're okay if you strike out. And he swings and misses in the zone a ton. There just are not a lot of examples of guys coming from college with that strikeout rate that have succeeded in the majors. So it's a big risk. I probably err on the side of, okay, it wasn't a great draft class. Maybe there weren't a lot of options available there. Jeff and I both liked Devin Taylor quite a bit. And the knock on Devin Taylor was, well, he can't play anything but left field, and Big Ten competition, not great. There is that. Jace Lavalette had a great sophomore season, and then a bad junior year, bad draft year. Cleveland, that's a route Cleveland loves to go to, is taking the fact that maybe your junior year when you were younger and you dominated was your best, and junior year, I'm not sure. They also won $4 million on this pick, okay? That's the highest that's ever happened in that pick. The highest bonus ever for his draft slot, $617,000 over the slot for that place. So they put a lot of money into this. It's a big risk, big reward. And then they kind of went back to things that were a little more normal for them throughout the draft, except for Nolan Schubart. I like Dean Curley. I think that's a great pick because he was a first-round pick on a lot of people's boards as late as April or May. And then, there are some swing and miss issues there, and he also had a hard time finding a real defensive home. So I'm okay with that pick. They did go over on that one as well. Aaron Walton doesn't make a lot of sense to me. This is a big physical kid from Arizona that didn't put up really big numbers in an area where he should have, especially for power. So I don't really know I buy Aaron Walton. I think there's athleticism to play the outfield. But it's a guy who, doesn't have a lot of power. So I'm kind of finding that a little bit weird. He didn't have a lot of production in Arizona where the ball flies. Will Hines, I'm a little bit down on. I think it's a good profile. Very high spin. The Toronto or the Canadian route is interesting. He's a little bit smaller. I was really surprised that how under slot they were able to get him away from Wake Forest, but because they picked him in the CBB round and he was not really a top 100 guy for a lot of people, it makes sense they were able to draft him a little bit higher and give him a little bit less money to go where he did. It's an interesting pick. I'm not against it. It's a little bit safer, honestly, than some of the high school pitchers they took a year ago outside of Doughty, as safe as high school pitching can get, which is not very safe. But I'll be interested to see. I think it's an interesting decision. The Nolan Schubart thing for me doesn't make a lot of sense where they picked him. Obviously, they wanted their slot to get him. Nolan Schubart, I really enjoyed watching him play in college, but he is an even worse version of Jace Lavalette because he has the same issues with strikeout rates. He lacks even more athleticism. He's probably a first baseman or DH long term. I don't think he can play the outfield. And he was very bad in Big 12 competition. He did really well outside of the Big 12, which the Big 12 is a big conference, so you're playing smaller schools. Smaller schools and before conference play want to schedule a team like Oklahoma State. But when they got into Big 12 play against Big 12 teams and normal competition, his numbers went down. So I'm really not big on that pick. I understood the Lavalette thing because of the upside. I don't know about Schubart. Luke Hill, this goes back to them being a high contact middle infielder guy. I don't think he's a shortstop. He's probably a second baseman, but he's a high contact middle infielder. Riley Nelson, there might be more power in there, but there's a good hit tool, but he's a first baseman who maybe is C.J. Kafis light, because Kafis even had more power in college. Nelson Keljo, good stuff in college, strikeout-wise. Had a hard time missing bats, went back and forth from the rotation and the bullpen. The Guardians say he's going to be a starter for now, so we'll see what happens. Will McCausland is a pick a lot of people like, so that's a guy Cleveland can work with, I think. Martinez had not a lot of power. I was excited by the Ryan Prager pick in the 9th round. Martinez, just a guy coming from a small school who didn't hit for any power, who's only a first baseman. Not sure I understand that one either. Ryan Prager was a favorite of mine in 2024, so they've also scooped him up in this whole 2024 class thing. If they can get his velocity back up, there's a lot of induced vertical break on that fastball that can make it deceptive and hard to pick up and can go over bats. He had good control his junior year, his senior year, what he went back for, just was not as good. So Cleveland gets him at a discount. Hopefully they can get him back to what he was the year before. And if they can get him into like the 92, 93 range with the fastball, I really like where things go. As far as down the board picks after that, because now we're getting into the Harrison Bodendorf and the backup catchers they got and some other arms. Anthony Silva, that's a guy a lot of people thought was a first-round talent in 2024, but the bat never came along. This is not, obviously Cleveland has proven they can't teach power, right? This is a team that has very much proven they wanted to take the route of teaching power if they had a guy who could make contact. Not the case. They cannot be able to do that. So Anthony Silva, to me, ends up being a defensive first organizational infielder who maybe becomes a utility backup in the majors. Evan Crest is interesting. He was hurt, so we'll see what happens there. Derek Munoz is a really interesting pick because he has bounced around a ton. He's been in the Dominican Republic. He's been in New York. He's been in California, or Texas and California. Very hard there. And bummer they didn't sign Von Necker. They didn't have the money to sign him, but I thought he was an interesting arm back in the spring. So that's the only guy they didn't sign. They had 22 picks. They signed 21 of them, with Von Necker going to, I believe, Oklahoma. So they'll check in on him. All right, we talked draft a little bit. I said I was going to talk about the Arizona Fall League participants, or guys who I think are candidates for this. So the Guardians actually could have a really fun Arizona Fall League contingent this year. Now I'm curious to see. Before I thought, okay, Travis Bazzana is a lock to play out here because of the time he missed. Now he's going to Columbus. So I still wouldn't be surprised if Travis Bazzana plays in the Arizona Fall League because of the time missed. If he doesn't make his way up to Cleveland this year, I think there's still a chance. Obviously, if he does, then we'll see what happens there. But I'm really interested to see what that looks like when he's in Columbus. So I think there's a chance for Travis Bazzana to play in the Arizona Fall League. I think the other guy that makes a ton of sense that I'm a lot more confident on would be Angel Hanau, or Angel Hanau. I think Angel Hanau is definitely going to play out there because he missed a lot of time earlier in the season. And he's a guy who's got to be on the 40-man roster later this season. So it would not shock me at all to see him in the Arizona Fall League after the season's over to make up some of that missed time and just get him prepared for hopefully the one half of Akron next season. I tweeted some names the other day. Every team has to send at least one catcher. I'm not sure. Maybe they'll send Cooper Ingle. It wouldn't shock me if they did. Maybe it'll be Jacob Cozart. I'm not sure, but maybe one of those two go. Outside of those two, I don't see who else they would send other than a guy who would just be going as a backup. So that would be like, a Johnny Tincher or Cameron Barstad, someone who would go as a backup. Cody Huff went last year, so I don't think they'll send him again. So maybe if they decide against Ingle and Kozar. I'd love to see Ingle go out there, but he also doesn't really need to because he's going to be in Columbus. So maybe Kozar ends up going, and if not, it's probably like Tincher or Barstad. I could see Alfonso and Rosario heading out there as well. He's had a great year. He's missed a little bit of time here and there with Brit stuff. I could see Rosario going out there in the Arizona Fall League this year. Possibly Khalil Watson. I think Khalil Watson would be an interesting fit out there because this is a guy they want to get more time. He missed a month this season, not a long time, but this is a guy I think they want to get more time with, more exposure. I've heard some weird transgressions with Khalil Watson off the field. Nothing like terrible, just weird stuff that might cause some friction between him and the organization. We'll see how that all pans out, but we'll see if he gets out to the Arizona Fall League if they want to try to expose him to more people. Yorman Gomez could be a guy that I think goes. Yorman Gomez, I wrote about him earlier this week, or this weekend. He had a great Saturday. His first really big start I've ever seen. He struck out 10 in 6 1/3 innings, was a really good start. This is the longest I've ever seen Gomez hold his stuff into a start. Normally by the 4th or 5th inning, Gomez usually starts to see his stuff deteriorate. The velocity comes down. He can't locate. He starts walking guys. He held his stuff into the 6th inning in that start. 93 and 95. I heard he's hit 96, 97 this year. The curveball is really fun. There's a couple other pitches in there as well. So I could see Yorman Gomez getting some innings out there because I think he's having a little bit of a breakout season. I would love to see Josh Hartle get some time out there because I think Josh Hartle should be in Akron, honestly, but it'd be good to get him, pushed forward a little bit as well. Jason Churio to me looks like a candidate because he missed time with that shoulder issue and he is having a hard time getting on track this year. So I think Jason Churio is a perfect candidate for the Arizona Fall League this year. And obviously, I'd love to see Daniel Espino out there. I think it's unlikely they put him in that environment. This is what I have on Daniel Espino, and this is not anything official or concrete. But I was around in Lake County not too long ago, and I heard from a friend, somebody who was rehabbing out in Arizona with Daniel Espino, who was throwing bullpens out in Arizona next to Daniel Espino, and talked to people he was signing for and talked to teammates and said that Daniel Espino was throwing 100 miles an hour in bullpens out in Arizona. That was the last I heard. That was like a month ago or 3 weeks ago, and that's coming from a player who rehabbed out there. So it's secondhand, but it comes from a player, and he wasn't telling me, and I overheard it, or a friend overheard it, so it really is secondhand information, but it's interesting to hear that from a player. So we'll see if that holds true, but that's what I got on Daniel Espino right now. I don't think Parker Messick or Austin Peterson go to the Arizona Fall League just because they got to be added to the 40 anyway, and their innings are pretty up there. Jake Miller could be a guy. I think Jake Miller went last year, but he's had a good season. I don't think they'll send Franco Alamon again. I don't see any other relievers out there for them to send. It's possible Khal Stephen goes there. Honestly, depending on how much longer he misses with the shoulder issue, I think Khal Stephen could be a guy that goes out there. Wouldn't be shocked to see that either. And that'd be a lot of fun. So I think the Guardians overall are going to have a really fun contingent in the Arizona Fall League. There's going to be a lot of things to pay attention to out there. I'm not going to get out there this year, but one of these years I'm hoping to go out there for the Arizona Fall League. All right, next time I'm able to do this show, I promise I will have an updated look at prospect rankings. We'll probably have more Arizona Fall League guys to talk about as well when those official announcements come down, which should be sometime by the end of the month. So I don't have a perfect date for this when I'll do it again. I'd like to say I'd do it next Sunday, but we'll see. I'm not going to commit to a time and schedule for this, but I thought I owed it to at least come back here and do an episode. I've been, like I said, it's not for the lack of want. I want to do this. It's just it's time and effort and all that kind of stuff. And I'm hoping at some point this year I'll have some broadcasters on to talk about it from Columbus and Akron and Lake County and Lynchburg. We'll have all of our friends back on. We'll have Michael Mahoney back on, hopefully, if he wants to. So we'll have guys back on at some point to talk about more about this. It's just when I get time and when I work on where I'm going to host this in terms of tools to record and all that kind of stuff. So bear with me. If you really want me to record more, I can do with this version until I figure out a better home. If I have time, but I do appreciate the interest in the podcast. I love doing it. It is a labor of love. It's just the time commitment to do that and keep up with other things in life and having the right tool set to do it and believing I can produce something that's worthy of being listened to without having the tool set that I normally would use for this kind of thing. So I'll continue to work on those things as well. But I do appreciate everyone's interest, support, patience, all that kind of stuff. And feel free to reach out any way you can. You can ask me on Twitter or Blue Sky. You can also email me if you're interested in chatting more about this podcast at jladabaseball@gmail.com. Would be happy to take suggestions and other things there, or communication about this podcast over there. I really appreciate all you listening. I really appreciate it. It's a labor of love for sure. And some people tell me they really like this version of the podcast, and I'll try to do more as much as I can in the future. But this is Guardians of the Future. Make sure you're subscribed on all platforms on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed on Substack at Next Year in Cleveland for all minor league updates. Make sure you are listening to Locked On Guardians every day as well, so you can get more over there. Thank you all again, and in the meantime, keep watching some Guardians baseball, some prospects. I'll catch you on the other side.